Hey geometry students, so this is going to be problem number 8 from your homework assignment 9.3. So today we were doing triangle congruence in class and we did some proof puzzles. And now we've got one of these fill in the blank proofs. So we start with our givens and just kind of looking at the picture, what we're dealing with here. So we've got C is the midpoint of BD, that's our first one. Okay, so C is the midpoint. That tells us that it cuts this line right here into two equal pieces. So at some point in my proof, I'm probably going to be saying that BC is congruent to CD. The next thing that it tells us is that AB is perpendicular to BD. So if I look at this line here, AB and BD, perpendicular means that they meet up at right angles. So this right here is a right angle. Same thing for the next one, BD is perpendicular to DE. So this same line right here is perpendicular to this line as well. So this is going to be a right angle also. Another thing that we can see from this picture is we have some vertical angles going on right here. So whenever lines cross like that, we have vertical angles, and we know that those are going to be congruent. Okay, so just from looking at what we've marked on this picture, we've got an angle and another angle and the side that's in between them. So we're probably going to be using angle, side, angle at the end of this proof to show congruence. So that's just something to kind of keep in the back of our mind as we go through this proof. So we started with reading the givens, marking them in the picture. Now let's go ahead and mark them down in our proof. We've got C is the midpoint of BD. That's one of our givens. And then we have AB is perpendicular to BD and BD is perpendicular to DE. So that's these two things all wrapped up into one step. So that's our other given. Okay. So then step 3 says BC is congruent to CD. So if we look in the picture, we've got BC right here and CD right here. So those were the two things. We talked about those being congruent because C was the midpoint, cutting this segment in half. So that's just going to be definition of midpoint. Okay. So then the next step says angle BCA. So BCA, that's going to be this angle right here. And angle ECD, so this angle right here, says those two are congruent. And if we remember back to what we were talking about earlier, these were our vertical angles that we saw in the picture. So I'm just going to say vertical angles are congruent. There we go. Then step 5, it says ABC and EDC are right angles. So these are our two right angles that we were talking about earlier. And that was because of these two things being perpendicular. All right, so the perpendicular relationship tells us they meet up at right angles. So that's just going to be definition of perpendicular. Okay, so then step 6, ABC is congruent to angle EDC. So we just got done saying that angle ABC and angle EDC are right angles. And we know all right angles are 90 degrees. So since they're both 90 degrees, they're equal to each other. So you could say definition of right angles, or you could say something like all right angles are equal to each other. That's probably what I'm going to say, is that right angles are equal to each other. And I'm kind of running out of room there. Okay. And then the last step, the triangles are congruent to each other, and that's where we're going to bring in what we were thinking about at the beginning, that angle side angle, because we have a pair of corresponding angles, we have another pair of corresponding angles, And then we have a pair of congruent corresponding sides that are in between the angles, kind of making an angle side sandwich here. So that's how we know it's going to be angle side angle here. All right, so there you go. There's problem number 8 for you. Yeah, hopefully this was helpful.